The lecture hall fell silent as Professor Kriltak projected the holographic image of Earth onto the main display. Every student in Advanced Xenobiology 401 knew what was coming. The Deathworld assignment. 3 students in the back row had already turned a sickly shade of green. "Class," Kriltak began, his 4 eyes scanning the room with what could only be described as sadistic pleasure. "This semester, you will each be required to complete a field study on a Class 12 Deathworld. Yes, you heard correctly. 12. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Vorn, a hulking Graxian who had survived 3 years of the most brutal academic program in the Galactic Union, actually whimpered. Class 12 worlds were not just dangerous. They were actively, aggressively, horrifyingly lethal to almost every known form of life. "But, Professor," squeaked Mila, a Zentari whose species prided themselves on their logical approach to everything, "the survival rate for Class 12 expeditions is, well, 32%, Kriltak finished helpfully. "Yes, thank you for that cheerful reminder, Mila. However, I have excellent news. This year, each of you will be paired with a human guide." The room erupted into nervous chatter. Humans. The galaxy's newest addition to the Galactic Union, and arguably its most terrifying. They came from Earth, the only Class 12 Deathworld to ever produce a spacefaring civilization. Most species required environmental suits just to stand on Earth's surface for more than a few minutes. Humans walked around in what they called casual clothing, and complained when it was too hot or too cold, as if their planet had any concept of moderation. Kriltak raised a tentacle for silence. "Your human guides have volunteered through the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Program. They are all students themselves, studying xenobiology from the human perspective. This should be, enlightening for all parties involved." The door at the back of the lecture hall hissed open, and a small human female walked in. She was tiny by galactic standards, barely reaching 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. She wore simple clothing, something the humans referred to as jeans and a t-shirt, neither of which appeared to offer any protective qualities whatsoever. "Everyone, this is Kira Thompson. She will be demonstrating some basic Earth survival techniques today." Kira waved casually at the class, completely unbothered by the hundreds of eyes staring at her with a mixture of fascination and terror. She set down a backpack, and Vorn immediately activated his personal shield, convinced she was carrying weapons. "Hey guys," Kira said, her voice bright and friendly. "So, I hear you are all pretty nervous about visiting Earth. That is totally understandable. It is kind of intense if you are not used to it." "Kind of intense?" repeated Thorax, an insectoid Clixian whose species could survive in vacuum for short periods. "Your planet has documented megafauna that hunt in packs, atmospheric electrical discharges capable of incinerating organic matter, and tectonic instability that creates mountain-sized waves of water." Kira nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, we call those wolves, lightning, and tsunamis. They are definitely things to watch out for, but honestly, most of Earth is pretty chill if you know what you are doing." Professor Kriltak's translator struggled with the term chill, eventually settling on comfortable and non-threatening, which caused several students to check if their translators were malfunctioning. "Miss Thompson," Kriltak said, gesturing toward the front of the room, "perhaps you could share some of your personal experiences with Earth's environment? I believe you mentioned you grew up in a rural area?" Kira's face lit up. "Oh, yeah. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. Beautiful place. Lots of forests, streams, wildlife. I spent most of my childhood running around barefoot, climbing trees, swimming in creeks, stuff like that." The entire class stared at her in horrified silence. I am sorry, Mila said slowly, her voice shaking. Did you say barefoot? Yep. I mean, I wore shoes when I had to, like at school or whatever, but at home, barefoot all the way. The ground feels amazing under your feet, you know? Soft moss, warm rocks in the sun, cool mud after it rains. Plus, it made me way better at not stepping on sharp things. Vorn raised a trembling claw. What? What kind of sharp things? Kira shrugged. Oh, you know, rocks, sticks, thorns, the occasional piece of broken glass if you were near the old barn. You learn to watch where you step pretty quick. Reflexes and all that. The room had gone completely silent. Even Professor Krilltak looked slightly disturbed, and he had spent 40 years studying Deathworld ecosystems. You are telling us, Thorax said carefully, that as a juvenile, with developing biology and incomplete neurological systems, you regularly traversed your Deathworld environment without protective foot coverings? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds way more dramatic than it was, Kira laughed. Look, human feet are actually pretty tough. We evolved to walk and run long distances. Our ancestors used to chase prey for hours, until the animals literally collapsed from exhaustion. We are persistence hunters. Our feet can handle a lot. A student near the front made a noise that sounded like a muffled scream. Kira pulled up a holographic display from her datapad showing an image of Earth's Appalachian region. Towering trees, rocky outcrops, rushing water, and dense vegetation filled the screen. It looked like a nightmare habitat from a horror simulation. This is where I grew up, she said fondly. See that creek? I used to catch crawfish there with my bare hands. They are these little crustaceans that hide under rocks. You have to be quick, though, because they can pinch pretty hard if you are not careful. You hunted armored prey with your unprotected appendages, Mila stated flatly, no longer phrasing it as a question. I mean, I would not call it hunting exactly, more like enthusiastic catching. We would have cookouts and boil them up with potatoes and corn. Super good. Vorn looked like he might pass out. Your juvenile recreation involved capturing defensive organisms capable of inflicting injury, then consuming them in social gatherings? Kira blinked. You guys have never had a crawfish boil? Man, you are missing out. Okay, wait, let me show you something else. She swiped through her images, pulling up a photo of herself, probably around 10 years old by human standards, sitting on a massive rock next to a waterfall. She was smiling widely, completely soaked, and yes, barefoot. This was from when I hiked to Rainbow Falls with my dad. It is about a 6-mile round trip, pretty steep in places. The water is freezing cold because it comes from mountain runoff, but jumping in after a long hike is the best feeling ever. Professor Krilltak leaned forward. You immersed yourself in unregulated water of unknown purity and potentially dangerous temperature? Well, yeah, it is a waterfall. That is kind of the point. The cold water is amazing when you are all sweaty from hiking. Plus, there is something really cool about swimming in a natural pool. Way better than a regular swimming pool with all those chemicals. Thorax's antennae were vibrating with what his species displayed as extreme anxiety. Did you not worry about aquatic predators, parasitic organisms, or harmful bacterial contamination? Nah, not really. I mean, you check for snakes sometimes, and you do not drink the water without filtering it, but swimming is fine. The current is usually strong enough that most stuff just gets washed downstream anyway. Snakes, repeated Vorn weakly. You checked for snakes, as in multiple species of potentially venomous reptilian predators? Kira nodded. Well, most snakes in that area are not venomous. We have copperheads and timber rattlesnakes, but they usually leave you alone if you do not bother them. I only ever saw a couple during all my hiking trips. They are actually pretty shy. She said this as if it were completely reasonable, as if the presence of venomous reptiles was a minor detail, barely worth mentioning, as if she had not just casually admitted to recreating in an environment where deadly predators were an expected feature of the landscape. Mila's voice came out as barely a whisper. "How are you alive?" Kira laughed, a genuinely amused sound that somehow made everything worse. "Dude, I grew up in one of the safer parts of Earth. You should talk to my friend Marcus. He is from Australia. Now, that is a scary place. Everything there is either venomous, poisonous, or wants to eat you. Sometimes all three. There are more dangerous regions on your planet than the one you described?" Professor Kriltak asked, his academic interest momentarily overriding his concern. "Oh, absolutely. Australia has box jellyfish, funnel web spiders, saltwater crocodiles, great white sharks, blue-ringed octopuses, taipans, which are like super venomous snakes, and cassowaries. Those are giant birds that can literally disembowel you with their claws. Marcus used to have to walk past them on his way to school." The class had moved beyond horror into a kind of numb shock. Kira continued, clearly warming to her topic. "And then there is the Amazon rainforest, where you have jaguars, anacondas, poison dart frogs, bullet ants, which have the most painful sting in the insect world, electric eels, piranhas, and like a million things that can kill you in increasingly creative ways. Oh, and Africa! Lions, leopards, hippos, which are actually the deadliest large animal on the continent, elephants, Cape buffalo, crocodiles, and my personal favorite, the honey badger." "Honey badger," Thorax repeated, translator struggling with the term. "This creature is named for a sweet nutritive substance?" "Yeah, they eat honey from beehives, but do not let the cute name fool you. Honey badgers are absolutely fearless. They will fight lions, raid beehives while being stung by thousands of bees, and just not care, eat venomous snakes like it is no big deal, and have skin so tough that bee stings, porcupine quills, and even arrows have trouble getting through. They are basically rage and determination in a small, furry package." Kira pulled up a video of a honey badger attacking a cobra twice its size, apparently immune to the venom, and proceeding to eat it while the snake was still trying to fight back. 3 students got up and left the room. Professor Kriltak did not stop them. "So, anyway," Kira said, completely oblivious to the existential crisis she was causing, "Earth really is not that bad once you get used to it. You just have to pay attention to your surroundings, learn what is dangerous and what is not, and respect the wildlife. Most animals do not want to mess with you if you do not mess with them first." Vorn raised a shaking claw again. "What about the animals that do want to mess with you?" Kira grinned. "Well, that is why we invented bear spray, snake hooks, and really good running shoes. Oh, and guns. But we probably will not need those for your field study. We are sticking to the relatively safe areas." The word relatively hung in the air like a threat. "I have a question," Mila said, her voice surprisingly steady, considering she had been on the verge of panic moments before. "You mentioned climbing trees as a juvenile. How high?" Kira thought for a moment. "I mean, it depended on the tree. Some of the old oaks near my house were maybe 60, 70 feet tall. I would climb as high as the branches would hold me. The view from up there is incredible. You climbed 70 feet into the air, supported only by organic structures of variable integrity, without safety equipment? Well, yeah, that is how tree climbing works. You find strong branches, test them before you put your full weight on them, and just kind of go for it. I fell a few times when I was learning, but nothing too serious. Couple of bruises, one sprained wrist. You learn to fall better after the first few times. She said this as if falling from trees was a normal part of childhood development, as if minor injuries were simply the cost of entertainment, as if risking a 70-foot drop was a reasonable way to spend an afternoon. Professor Kriltak had given up on maintaining his composed academic demeanor. Miss Thompson, at any point during your childhood, did your parental units express concern about these activities? Kira laughed again. My mom worried sometimes, but my dad was pretty chill about it. He figured kids need to learn how to assess risks and handle themselves in the outdoors. Plus, he did all the same stuff when he was a kid. It is kind of a family tradition. My grandpa taught my dad. My dad taught me. Pretty standard for people who grow up in the mountains. Standard, Vorn muttered. She says standard. Kira checked her watch, a simple mechanical device that somehow still functioned despite Earth's hostile environment. Okay, so Professor Kriltak asked me to give you guys some basic survival tips for your upcoming field study. First rule, stay hydrated. Earth's atmosphere has a lot of oxygen compared to most planets, and it is usually pretty humid in a lot of places. You will sweat more than you are used to, so drink water regularly. She pulled a water bottle from her backpack and took a long drink, demonstrating the concept as if they were children who needed visual aids. Second rule, wear appropriate clothing. I know a lot of your species need environmental suits anyway, but for those who can handle Earth's atmosphere, dress in layers. Temperature can change pretty quickly, depending on where you are and what time of day it is. Mornings might be cold, afternoons hot, evenings cold again. Layers let you adjust. Mila was taking notes with a slightly manic intensity. Third rule, watch where you step and what you touch. A lot of Earth's plants and animals have defense mechanisms. Some plants have thorns or irritating oils. Some animals bite or sting if threatened. Most of the time, they will leave you alone if you give them space and do not act threatening. How does one avoid acting threatening to Earth organisms? Thorax asked, genuinely curious despite his terror. Kira considered this. Mostly, just move calmly. Do not make sudden loud noises, and do not corner anything or get between a mother and her babies. Animals can usually tell if you are scared or aggressive based on your body language and scent. Just stay relaxed and give them room to escape if they want to. Your planet's fauna can detect fear through chemical analysis of perspiration. Thorax's antennae were vibrating again. Well, yeah. Lots of animals have really good senses of smell. Way better than humans, actually. Dogs can smell fear. Bears can smell food from miles away. Sharks can detect a single drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It is pretty impressive when you think about it. It was not impressive. It was terrifying. But Kira seemed genuinely fascinated by these capabilities rather than appropriately horrified. Fourth rule, she continued, learn about the local ecosystem before you go. Different regions have different hazards. What is safe to touch in a temperate forest might kill you in a tropical rainforest. Research is your friend. Professor Kriltak made a note to quadruple the research requirement for this assignment. And finally, Rule 5. Do not panic. Seriously, this is the most important one. Earth is a challenging environment, sure, but billions of humans live there every day without incident. We have cities, towns, farms, parks, all kinds of developed areas where you are perfectly safe. Even in wild areas, if you stay calm and use common sense, you will probably be fine. Probably was not the reassuring word she seemed to think it was. Kira smiled at the class, radiating confidence and good cheer. Any questions? Every hand in the room shot up. Yes, you in the third row? Kira pointed at a Vrelin student whose protective eye membranes were fully engaged. What is the actual probability of death during our field study? Kira's smile faltered slightly. Oh, Professor Krilltak? You want to take that one? Krilltak cleared his throat. Statistically, with proper preparation, human guides, and adherence to safety protocols, mortality rates drop to approximately 4%. 4%? Several students shouted in unison. That is actually really good for a Class 12 world, Kira offered helpfully. For comparison, early human exploration had mortality rates of like 50% or higher. You guys have way better survival odds than the pioneers who first explored Earth. This was not comforting. This was the opposite of comforting. Vorn stood up, his massive frame somehow looking small and vulnerable. With all due respect to Miss Thompson and her terrifying Barefoot childhood, I would like to formally request a transfer to any other course, even advanced thermodynamics of stellar cores. Anything but this. Several other students nodded in agreement. Professor Krilltak held up a tentacle. Transfer requests will be processed according to standard academic procedures. However, I should mention that completion of this course is required for your degree program. Those who withdraw will need to retake it next year, with a different Deathworld assignment. The students sat back down. Better the Deathworld, you know, apparently. Kira was scrolling through her datapad, pulling up more images. Hey, it is really not that bad. Look, here is a picture from last week. I took a group of Centaurian exchange students to the Great Smoky Mountains. Everyone had a great time. The image showed 5 Centaurians, all wearing full environmental suits, with extra protective layers, standing rigidly in what appeared to be a forest clearing. They looked absolutely petrified. Behind them, Kira stood casually in shorts and a tank top, grinning like she was at a theme park instead of a Deathworld wilderness. See? They all survived. All? Mila asked weakly. How many started the trip? Oh, just those 5. I meant everyone who went came back. 100% return rate. The fact that she felt the need to specify this was not encouraging. Professor Krilltak checked the time. I believe we have covered sufficient material for today. Ms. Thompson will be available for individual consultations if anyone wishes to discuss specific concerns about the upcoming field study. Class dismissed. The students filed out with the enthusiasm of prisoners heading to their execution. Kira waved cheerfully at each of them, still completely oblivious to the psychological damage she had inflicted. As Vorn passed her, he paused. Miss Thompson, may I ask one final question? Of course. What is up? Do you truly feel no fear when interacting with your planet's hostile ecosystem? Kira thought about this seriously. I mean, I have healthy respect for dangerous situations. I am not going to pet a rattlesnake or swim with sharks or anything stupid like that. But fear? Not really. Earth is my home. I grew up learning how to exist there safely. It is like, I do not know, asking if you are afraid of your own living space. It is just where I live. Vorn stared at her for a long moment. Humans are insane. Kira laughed. Yeah, we get that a lot. See you next week for the field prep session. As Vorn left the lecture hall, he made a mental note to update his will and send a final message to his family. The semester had just begun, and he was already planning his funeral. Behind him, he could hear Kira chatting with Professor Krilltak about the best hiking trails for beginners, her voice bright and enthusiastic, discussing trails with names like Devil's Peak and Widowmaker's Ridge, as if they were pleasant afternoon strolls. 4% mortality rate, Vorn thought grimly. Those were not good odds. Those were not good odds at all. But they would have to do. The field preparation session took place in Environmental Training Room 7. a massive facility designed to simulate various planetary conditions. When Vorn arrived, he found the room had been transformed into what Kira cheerfully described as a mild representation of Earth's Appalachian ecosystem. Mild was a lie. The temperature was already uncomfortable, hovering around what humans considered room temperature, but felt like a sauna to most galactic species. Humidity clung to everything. Vorn could actually see moisture suspended in the air, something his homeworld's arid climate had never prepared him for. Worse, the room was filled with actual Earth, vegetation, brought in under strict quarantine protocols. Trees, shrubs, flowering plants, and ground cover created a dense, chaotic tangle that looked nothing like the orderly ecosystems of civilized planets. Kira stood in the center of it all, wearing hiking boots this time, Vorn noted with relief, cargo pants, and a light jacket. She looked completely at ease, like she had just stepped into her backyard rather than a meticulously contained biohazard zone. "All right, everyone," she called out, as the 15 students who had not dropped the course filed in nervously. "Welcome to Earth Basics, Part 2. Today we are going to practice some fundamental outdoor skills. Nothing too intense, I promise." Her promises meant nothing. Everyone knew this by now. Mila raised a tentacle. "When you say nothing too intense, could you provide a specific definition? Because your previous use of terms like chill and safe have proven somewhat unreliable." Kira had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Okay, fair point. Let me be more specific. Today we will practice identifying safe versus unsafe plants, basic navigation without technology, fire starting, water purification, and shelter construction. All skills you will need if your equipment fails during the field study." "If our equipment fails?" Thorax clicked nervously. "Should we be concerned about equipment reliability?" No. Your gear is top-notch. But my dad always taught me to prepare for worst-case scenarios. He used to say hope for the best, plan for the worst. Better to know how to survive without your tech, and never need it than need it, and not know how. Professor Krilltak entered the room carrying what appeared to be emergency medical supplies. Lots of emergency medical supplies. This did not inspire confidence. "Let us begin with plant identification," Kira said, gesturing to a small display table covered with various specimens. This is incredibly important because Earth has many edible plants, but also many toxic ones. Sometimes they look very similar. She picked up 2 plants that looked nearly identical to Vorn's eyes. Both had 3 leaves arranged in a cluster. Both had green stems. Both seemed utterly unremarkable. This one, Kira held up the plant in her right hand, is wild strawberry. Completely edible, tastes great, good source of vitamins. This one, she raised her left hand, is poison ivy. Touching it will give most humans an incredibly itchy, painful rash that lasts for weeks. For species with different biochemistry, reactions vary. Some of you might not react at all. Others might have severe allergic responses. She said this while holding the poison ivy in her bare hand. "Are you not concerned about exposure?" Mila asked, horrified. "Oh, I am one of the lucky ones. I am not very sensitive to poison ivy. I can handle it without much reaction, but I still wash my hands thoroughly afterward because the oil can transfer to other people." Vorn was beginning to understand why humans had developed such advanced medical technology. They needed it just to survive childhood. Kira spent the next 30 minutes showing them various earth plants, explaining which were safe, which were dangerous, and which were safe for humans, but potentially lethal to other species. The list of deadly flora was distressingly long. Hemlock, nightshade, foxglove, oleander, castor beans, and something called a manchineel tree, which Kira described as so toxic that even standing under it during rain could cause blistering. Why would evolution produce such organisms? Thorax wondered aloud. What purpose does lethality serve? Defense mechanism, Kira explained. If animals learn that eating you will kill them, they stop eating you. Natural selection favors traits that help survival and reproduction. Toxicity is actually a pretty effective strategy. Your planet's plants wage chemical warfare against its fauna, Mila stated flatly. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds dramatic. But yeah, basically. That is why you never eat anything unless you are absolutely certain it is safe. When in doubt, do not put it in your mouth. She moved on to navigation, pulling out what she called a compass and a topographical map. Both were primitive by galactic standards, relying on Earth's magnetic field and paper representations of terrain rather than satellite positioning and holographic displays. Technology fails, Kira said, demonstrating how to orient the map using the compass. Batteries die, equipment breaks, interference happens. But a compass is just a magnetized needle. As long as Earth has a magnetic field, which it will for millions of years, this works. And a paper map does not need power. She taught them how to identify landmarks, estimate distances, and navigate using the sun's position. Vorn found himself grudgingly impressed, despite his terror. These were practical skills, honed over thousands of years of human survival on a planet that seemed actively hostile to life. Now, for fire starting, Kira announced, and several students immediately activated their personal shields. Fire is one of humanity's oldest tools, she continued, apparently not noticing their defensive postures. It provides warmth, purifies water, cooks food, and keeps predators away. Every human should know at least 3 ways to start a fire. She demonstrated using matches, a lighter, and then, horrifyingly, a piece of metal and stone that she struck together to create sparks. The sparks landed on a small pile of dried plant material, which began smoking, then glowing, then actually burning. This is called a ferro rod, Kira explained, feeding small twigs to her growing flame. It works even when wet, unlike matches, and it lasts for thousands of strikes. Basic survival gear. The fire grew, crackling and consuming the wood with enthusiastic efficiency. Heat radiated outward, and Vorn had to admit it was not entirely unpleasant. But the principle of controlled combustion as a casual survival technique was still deeply unsettling. Kira used the fire to demonstrate water purification, boiling water collected from a simulated stream running through the training room. Boiling kills most harmful microorganisms, she explained. You want a rolling boil for at least 1 minute, longer at high altitudes where water boils at lower temperatures. How does one determine altitude without instruments? Asked a student named Plex, a silicon-based quarian who had been mostly silent until now. Air pressure, temperature, vegetation changes, terrain features, Kira listed. You learn to read environmental cues, like certain tree species only grow at certain elevations. Oxygen feels thinner at high altitude. Water boils at different temperatures. You put all the information together and make an educated guess. Humans navigate by educated guessing? Plex sounded almost offended by the concept. We navigate by observation and experience, Kira corrected gently. It is less precise than your technology, sure, but it works. Our ancestors crossed entire continents using these techniques. She let the fire burn down to embers, then demonstrated proper extinguishing procedures, which apparently involved drowning it with water, stirring the ashes, and checking for heat with her bare hand, hovering inches above the remains. Never leave a fire unattended, and always make sure it is completely out before you leave. Wildfires are no joke. The final lesson involved shelter construction. Kira showed them how to build what she called a debris hut, using fallen branches, leaves, and moss to create a surprisingly sturdy structure that would supposedly provide protection from wind and rain. In a real emergency, shelter is often more important than food, she explained, weaving branches together with practiced ease. Humans can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Priorities matter. Vorn helped construct a shelter under Kira's guidance, his large claws actually proving useful for manipulating the branches. The work was physical and surprisingly satisfying. When they finished, Kira crawled inside to demonstrate, disappearing into what looked like a pile of forest debris, but was apparently a functional temporary dwelling. "See?" Her muffled voice came from inside. "Cozy." It was not cozy. It was a pile of organic matter held together by hope and spatial reasoning. But Vorn had to admit it probably would keep rain out and heat in. As the session wound down, Kira gathered everyone together. "Okay, so next week is the actual field study. We will be spending 3 days in the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. It is beautiful this time of year, and the weather should be mild. We will have base camp with full facilities and daily excursions to practice these skills in a real environment." "Define mild weather," Mila requested. Kira pulled up a forecast on her datapad. "Highs around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, lows around 50. Possible light rain on day 2. Gentle breeze. Honestly, perfect hiking weather." She showed them images of the location. Dense forests, rolling mountains, clear streams, and hiking trails that wound through terrain that looked moderately apocalyptic to most of the students. "What fauna should we expect to encounter?" Thorax asked, trying to sound clinical rather than terrified. "Deer, squirrels, lots of birds, maybe black bears if we are lucky, though they usually avoid people. Possibly wild turkeys, which can be aggressive during mating season, but it is the wrong time of year for that. Some snakes, but again, they avoid people mostly. Lots of insects, especially butterflies and bees near the flowering plants." "You consider potential bear encounters as lucky?" Vorn could not help himself. Kira's face lit up. "Bears are amazing. Black bears are actually pretty timid despite their size. If you see one, you just make yourself look big, make noise, and back away slowly. They almost never attack unless you surprise them or get between a mother and cubs. I have seen maybe a dozen bears in my life, and every single one ran away from me." "Every single one so far," Mila muttered. "Fair point," Kira conceded. "But seriously, bear attacks are incredibly rare. You are statistically more likely to be struck by lightning." Given that Earth had lightning, this was not as reassuring as she intended. Professor Kriltak distributed equipment lists and final briefing materials. "You will each be provided with standard exploration gear rated for Class 12 environments. However, Ms. Thompson has requested you also carry certain primitive backup tools. Please humor her. They weigh very little and may prove educational if nothing else." The primitive tools turned out to include compasses, paper maps, fire starters, water purification tablets, emergency blankets, and something called paracord, which was apparently very strong rope that could be unraveled for various purposes. "Humans are obsessed with backup plans," Thorax observed. "We are obsessed with not dying in stupid ways," Kira corrected cheerfully. "There is a difference." As the students filed out, Vorn approached Kira hesitantly. "May I ask a personal question?" "Sure. What is up?" "Do you genuinely enjoy this? Living on Earth, I mean? Dealing with all the hazards and uncertainties?" Kira considered this carefully. "I love it. I really do. Yeah, Earth can be dangerous if you are careless. But it is also incredibly beautiful. There is something special about standing on a mountain peak, you climbed with your own legs, or swimming in a waterfall, or watching a sunset paint the sky in colors that holograms can never quite capture. The danger is part of it, in a weird way. It makes you pay attention, makes you present in the moment. She smiled, and Vorn was struck by how genuinely happy she looked. My favorite memory is from when I was maybe 12 years old. My dad and I did this overnight camping trip, just the two of us. We hiked about 8 miles into the backcountry, set up our tent near this incredible view of the valley below. That night, we sat by the campfire and watched the stars come out. No light pollution, no buildings, no noise except the wind in the trees and the crackling fire. Just us and the mountain and the universe above. Her expression turned thoughtful. Dad told me that humans are part of Earth, not separate from it. We evolved here, adapted to here, belong here. Every challenge our planet throws at us made us stronger, smarter, more resilient. He said that is why we explore space, why we push boundaries, why we keep going even when things are hard. It is in our nature. Earth taught us that nothing worth having comes easy. Vorn found himself unexpectedly moved. Your father sounds wise. He is the best, Kira agreed. He is also the one who taught me that fear and respect are different things. You should respect Earth's power, understand the risks, prepare accordingly. But fear? Fear makes you freeze up, make bad decisions, miss out on incredible experiences. So, yeah, I respect my planet, but I do not fear it. It is home. The next week arrived faster than anyone wanted. The transport shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Vorn watched through the viewport as they approached the landing zone. Mountains covered in green vegetation stretched as far as he could see. Rivers carved through valleys. Clouds drifted past, so close he could almost touch them. It was terrifyingly beautiful. The shuttle landed at a designated field site, and the doors opened. Earth's atmosphere rushed in, bringing smells Vorn had never experienced. Plant life, soil, moisture, and something else he could not identify. Richness, maybe? Complexity? The air tasted different here, heavy with oxygen and life. Kira bounded down the ramp like she was coming home from vacation. Welcome to North Carolina, everyone. Temperature is about 72 degrees, humidity is moderate, and we have excellent visibility today. Perfect. The students descended more cautiously, adjusting to the gravity which was slightly higher than standard galactic norm, the oxygen content, the sensory overload of an actual Deathworld ecosystem. Base camp was mercifully civilized. Climate-controlled habitation modules, full medical facilities, communication equipment, and emergency evacuation protocols. Professor Kriltak had spared no expense on safety measures, but Kira clearly had other plans. Okay, everyone, gear up. We are doing a short hike this afternoon, just 3 miles out and back, to get you acclimated. Easy trail, minimal elevation gain. Consider it a warm-up. The hike was not easy. The trail was rocky, uneven, and wound through terrain that seemed designed to trip anyone not evolved for bipedal locomotion on irregular surfaces. Roots crossed the path. Stones shifted underfoot. The incline was gradual but relentless. But something strange happened as they walked. Vorn found himself adjusting, learning the rhythm of the movement, watching where Kira stepped and copying her technique. His breathing steadied. His muscles, while protesting, began to find efficiency in the motion. And the forest around them was genuinely magnificent. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden shafts. Birds sang in languages his translator could not process. A stream burbled alongside the trail, clear water flowing over smooth stones. The whole environment pulsed with energy and life in a way that sterile spaceship corridors never could. Kira stopped at a viewpoint, gesturing for everyone to gather. Before them, the valley spread out in layers of green and blue, mountains fading into the distance like waves on an ocean of land. "This," she said simply, "is why I love Earth." Vorn stared at the vista and felt something shift in his understanding. Yes, this planet was dangerous. Yes, it could kill him in approximately 17,000 different ways, but it was also alive in a way few worlds achieved. Not just biologically active, but vibrantly, aggressively, beautifully alive. "I think I am beginning to understand," he said quietly. Kira grinned. "Just wait until you see the sunrise from the peak tomorrow morning. We are starting the hike at 5 a.m. 5 a.m.? Mila groaned. "That is the middle of the night." "That is when the best hiking happens," Kira countered. "Cool air, fewer bugs, and you reach the summit right as the sun comes up. Trust me, it is worth losing sleep." That night, lying in his sleeping pod at base camp, Vorn listened to the sounds of Earth's nocturnal ecosystem. Insects chirping, things rustling in the underbrush, wind in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, an owl calling. It should have been frightening. Instead, it was oddly peaceful. The 3-day field study passed in a blur of new experiences. They hiked higher peaks each day, practiced their survival skills, encountered wildlife that Kira narrated with infectious enthusiasm, and slowly, grudgingly, began to appreciate the Deathworld's terrible beauty. On the final morning, standing on a mountain summit as the sun painted the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink, Vorn made a decision. He pulled out his communication device and composed a message to his family. "I am alive." More surprisingly, I am starting to understand why humans are the way they are. Their planet shaped them into something simultaneously fragile and incredibly resilient. They walk barefoot through hazards that would kill most species, and they call it childhood. They climb mountains for fun. They respect their world, but refuse to fear it. I think there is a lesson here, though I am still trying to articulate what it is. Something about growth requiring challenge, about comfort being the enemy of excellence, about how the most beautiful things are often found in the most difficult places. Also, I am definitely keeping the compass and fire starter. Kira was right. Backup plans matter. When they returned to the university, Vorn stood before his advanced xenobiology class and delivered his field study presentation. He showed images of the mountains, the forests, the impossibly blue sky. He talked about plant identification and fire starting and navigation by natural landmarks. But mostly, he talked about perspective. About how a Class 12 Deathworld had produced a species that valued exploration over safety, experience over comfort, and beauty over ease. About how humans had turned their planet's lethality into a teaching tool that made them uniquely suited for space exploration. "Earth will kill you if you are careless," he concluded. "But it will also show you what life looks like when it is lived fully, intensely, without the cushion of perfect safety. Humans do not just survive their homeworld, they thrive there. They love it. And after spending 3 days walking in their footsteps, barefoot or otherwise, I think I understand why." The class erupted in applause. Professor Kriltak nodded approvingly, and in the back of the room, Kira Thompson smiled, already planning next semester's field study to an even more challenging location. Because that was the thing about humans and their death world. They never settled for easy. They always pushed further, climbed higher, explored deeper. Earth had taught them that comfort was temporary, but growth was permanent. And maybe, just maybe, that was a lesson worth learning, even if it meant occasionally walking barefoot through a world designed to kill you. Vorn checked his schedule. Next semester's field study was listed as Amazon Rainforest Ecosystem Analysis. He did not drop the course. Instead, he started shopping for better hiking boots. After all, if a human child could do it barefoot, he could manage with proper footwear. Probably.